I didn't realize my girlfriend was cheating until the exact moment I overheard her telling another man she loved him. Ironically, I'd rushed home early that night with her favorite pad thai from Bangkok Garden, a little peace offering because I'd been working nonstop at the dealership, 75 hours this week alone. Standing in the doorway with a bag in hand, I heard her laugh and casually call me a naive idiot, like it was just some funny little joke between lovers. Except I wasn't the lover. That honor belonged to Jack, her coworker, apparently. I felt my chest tighten, embarrassment flooding my body, followed quickly by rage. But here's the twist: I never told anyone. I didn't confront her. Instead, I slipped quietly out of the apartment, Thai food still warm in my hand. I sat alone in the dark, parked behind Kroger, watching shoppers pass under the streetlights, oblivious to my world quietly imploding. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even punch the steering wheel. All I did was sit there, replaying how pathetic I must have looked working like a dog, so she'd never want for anything. Was she right? Was I naive, believing loyalty was a simple exchange? My sweat for her faithfulness? I knew right then confrontation wasn't my style. So, I decided to leave in silence, with dignity if I had any left. I emptied our joint account the next morning, leaving just enough so the bank wouldn't call her. I packed my things while she was at work. Jack was too, I supposed, and left a note on the kitchen counter. Hope Jack likes pad thai. That day was the last time I ever allowed someone else's betrayal to define me. From that point, I promised myself I was done playing the fool. I didn't go far, just 30 miles south to Groveport. Rented a month-to-month above a closed barbershop, the kind with sun-bleach posters in the window advertising $7 fades. The place smelled like mildew and old pomade, but it was mine. Nobody knew me there. I could breathe. She never called. Not once. I thought maybe she'd at least ask where I went, pretend to care. But silence is its own kind of truth, isn't it? You think heartbreak comes loud, shouting, accusations, but really it's quiet. It's the way your phone doesn't ring. The way your name never comes up in a story again. 2 weeks later, I heard Jack got fired. One of the techs from her office came into the dealership for a lease and recognized me. Asked if I'd heard. Apparently, there was some messy HR fallout, hostile work environment, or some such phrase that makes corporate people sweat. I smiled and said I hadn't heard a thing. Offered him a great deal on a pre-owned Civic. Here's what I didn't say. I may have sent screenshots of a few texts I'd found on her iPad to the company's ethics hotline. Nothing cruel, just informative. Enough to make someone upstairs nervous. I told myself it wasn't revenge, that it was justice. Maybe it was both. What came next wasn't triumph. It was boredom. Endless evenings eating gas station sandwiches, drinking bottom-shelf whiskey, and wondering if I should have just yelled at her that night. Demanded answers. Thrown the pad thai at the wall. But I didn't. And now the moment was gone, and I'd turned into a ghost of myself, haunting someone else's town. Funny thing, some nights, I'd walk to the Speedway on Hamilton Road just to feel like I was going somewhere. The fluorescent lights buzzed like they were alive, like they had purpose. I'd buy gum I didn't need. Sometimes I'd just stand in the snack aisle and stare at the rows of chips, like if I focused hard enough, the right bag would explain my life to me. It never did. About a month into my exile, my sister called. Not to ask how I was, but to guilt-trip me for missing Mom's birthday. Said everyone noticed my absence at Applebee's and that I was being selfish. I wanted to scream, selfish, but instead I muttered something about work and hung up. The truth is, I hadn't told my family anything. Not about the cheating, not about leaving, not about the note or the Thai food, or how I sometimes sat in the dark, trying to remember what my own voice sounded like when I was happy. I just disappeared from their radar like a glitch in a GPS. Growing up in Newark, Ohio, disappearing wasn't really an option. People noticed. Your business was everyone's. You sneeze, your neighbor brings over soup. You cry in a driveway, someone calls your mom. So I learned young to keep things quiet, tidy, manageable. Even my breakdowns came politely behind closed doors. That habit followed me into adulthood, especially when it came to women. Be agreeable, be strong, be the one who pays the rent and doesn't ask why she's texting during dinner. I told myself I was being respectful, supportive, but really, I was just afraid of being alone. That's the part one hate admitting, the fear. Not of her cheating, but of being without her, of sitting across from no one, of hearing only my own thoughts, unfiltered and unkind. And yet there I was, alone by choice this time. You'd think that kind of solitude would feel empowering, like reclaiming something. But it mostly felt like waiting. For what? I didn't know. Maybe for time to dull the edges. Maybe for her to apologize, though I knew she never would. I started drinking more than I should have. Nothing dramatic, no DUIs or lost jobs, but enough that the guy at the Speedway started greeting me by name. He called me boss, like that somehow made me less sad. I once bought a bottle of vodka and drank it on the hood of my car, parked behind a Dollar General. Watched the sun go down behind the family video that closed 5 years ago. Something about that dying light on dead businesses felt honest, like maybe I wasn't failing, just fading with everything else. It was the Craigslist ad that pulled me out of it, or maybe just gave me something else to spiral around. 99 Ranger. Runs fine. $500. Needs gone. The kind of listing that smells like desperation and rust. I didn't need a truck. I barely drove the car I had. But something about the finality of needs gone hit me. I called the number. Old guy in his 70s, lived out near Canal Winchester. Said the truck was his grandson's, who'd left town in a hurry and wasn't coming back. I didn't ask for details. I knew that tone, that quiet grief you don't name, because it's easier to say he moved than he vanished. I handed him $500 in cash, no haggle. The truck coughed to life and rattled like bones in a shoebox, but I didn't care. I drove it home with the window down, letting the wind slap my face like it was trying to wake me up. I spent the next few weeks fixing it. Not professionally, just enough to keep it alive. It gave me a reason to get up, scrub oil from my hands, feel like I was putting something broken back together. I told myself it wasn't symbolic. But of course it was. That dumb old Ford knew more about me than anyone else in Groveport. And here's the funny part. One day, while elbow deep in the engine, I caught myself humming. I hadn't made a sound like that in weeks. It startled me. Like finding a part of myself I thought I'd sold off years ago, buried under rent payments and ignored gut instincts. I even started sleeping a little. Real sleep. Not the whiskey and regret kind, but the kind where your body actually thinks it's safe. One night, I dreamt I was back in the apartment. Thai food in my hand again. Only this time, when I heard her voice calling me an idiot, I walked in. I looked her in the eye, smiled, and said, "Yeah, but I'm not your idiot anymore." I woke up laughing. First real laugh in months. Not because it was funny, but because even in dreams, I knew I'd already left. And that's what kept me sane, knowing I didn't need revenge or closure or even a damn apology. Just a clean engine and the wind in my face. I didn't expect to run into her. Columbus is big enough, and we'd lived on opposite ends of it. Me near Reynoldsburg, her up in Clintonville, where everything smells like coffee shops and people pretend their labradoodles are children. But there she was, Kroger on Refugee Road. I was buying paper towels. She was in the frozen foods aisle, looking right through a box of lean cuisine like it had offended her personally. She hadn't changed much. Same coat, same tired posture, but something in her eyes had cracked. Not broken, just tired in a way I recognized. I thought she'd ignore me, or maybe glare. But when she looked up and saw me, her whole face collapsed for a second. Not in regret, more like recognition. Like we were both in on the same long, bad joke, and neither of us had the energy to pretend otherwise anymore. She didn't say anything, just gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. I nodded back, and that was it. No apology. No, I messed up. No dramatic scene near the hot pockets. But here's the kicker. I felt nothing. No anger. No urge to confront. No cold satisfaction. I just wanted to get out of there before the moment tried to become something it wasn't. Back in my place, I didn't even think about her again until I took the paper towels out of the bag. For the first time in forever, my mind had other things in it, like whether the Ranger was making a new noise, or if I had the guts to finally go to one of those divorcee game nights at the VFW hall down the street. I never told anyone about running into her. It felt private, even sacred in a weird way. Like the universe had given me a final exam, and I passed by doing nothing at all. Maybe that's growth. Or maybe it's just emotional scar tissue doing its job. But for the first time, I didn't want her to hurt anymore. I didn't want her to beg or cry or realize anything too late. I just hoped, quietly, truly, that she'd never look at someone the way she looked at me that day again. Not because I still cared, but because I finally didn't. It was around that time I got a call from my old boss at the dealership. Said they needed help during tax season. Used inventory was flying off the lot, and they were short on closers. I hesitated. Going back felt like reopening a room I'd already sealed off with duct tape and denial. But my bank account was limping, and pride doesn't pay rent. So I said yes. The first day back, everything smelled the same. Coffee burned into the carpet, cheap cologne, desperation. It was like stepping into a version of myself I'd grown out of, like trying on a jacket that no longer fit but still had your name stitched inside. Everyone acted like I'd just taken a long vacation. No one asked why I disappeared. Maybe they were too polite, or maybe they just didn't want to hear the answer. In that business, you learn fast how to look away from what's cracked. There was a new guy, 25, baby-faced, eager. He followed me around like I had wisdom in my pockets. One night, he asked if I was married. I said no. He asked if I ever had been. I told him I'd come close once and left it at that. He said, "Man, that must have been hard." And I almost laughed. Not because it wasn't, but because of how simple he made it sound. Like heartbreak was just one clean break and not a slow unraveling that pulls your insides out thread by thread. Later that night, I caught my reflection in the showroom glass. For a second, I didn't recognize the man looking back. Not because he looked different, but because he looked returned. Like I crawled back into myself after months of drifting through static. I didn't stay at the job long, just through the season. Made some money, paid off a couple debts, bought a proper mattress. But the biggest thing I earned wasn't on paycheck. I proved to myself that I could walk back into a place that held ghosts and not be hound. I didn't expect to like solitude. For most of my life, I saw being alone as a kind of punishment, a shadow that followed you when you weren't useful to anyone anymore. But in Groveport, with no one calling, no one needing anything, I started to see the beauty in it. The quiet wasn't silence anymore, it was space. I'd sit out on the back steps some evenings with a beer, watching trains groan past in the distance. The sound used to feel lonely. Now it felt like a reminder. The world keeps moving whether you're in it or not. There's a strange comfort in that. I started writing things down. Just thoughts mostly. Nothing poetic. Lists. Memories. Things I never said out loud. Like how I once memorized her coffee order, but never told her. Or how I used to imagine what our kids would look like, even though we never talked about having any. Or that I sometimes still slept curled to one side of the bed, instinctively leaving space for someone who wasn't coming back. And then one day, I wrote down this sentence without really thinking. You don't need closure when you've got clarity. That one stuck with me, because I finally understood that what I wanted wasn't an apology or justice. It was peace. The kind you don't earn through confrontation or making someone see your worth. The kind you build in the stillness after the storm, when you've cleared enough wreckage to sit in the sun again. There was no big breakthrough, no revelation in church or therapy or on top of some mountain. Just small choices. Waking up early, making eggs instead of skipping breakfast, saying yes to the neighbor who invited me to help paint his garage, letting life back in, piece by piece, without demanding it explain itself. And maybe most importantly, forgiving myself for not seeing it sooner. I ran into Jack once. That surprised me more than seeing her. It was at a speedway, different one this time out near Obet's. I was grabbing gas and coffee. He was coming out just as I was going in. For a second, we locked eyes and both froze like deer, trying to decide who's going to bolt first. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just deflated. Like whatever version of himself she'd inflated with affection and stolen hours of the office had long since popped and leaked out. He nodded at me, kind of like she had in Kroger, and I gave him the same nod back. Polite, cold, final. He didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered, like he was waiting for me to say something first. Maybe he wanted a punch. Maybe he wanted forgiveness. I wasn't offering either. What would I even say? Thanks for showing me who she really was. Or maybe, you two deserve each other, and I hope that haunts you. But I didn't feel venom. Not anymore. I just felt distance. The kind you can't cross even if you tried. That night, I sat on the porch with a warm beer and thought about how strange life is, that the man who helped blow up my world could one day pass me like a stranger with nothing to say. No croce, no war. Just two men quietly surviving the aftermath of the same disaster. It made me wonder how many people we pass every day who are holding stories like that. Quiet collapses, private wars, tiny implosions behind steady eyes. And I thought, if he had apologized, would I have believed him? Or worse, would I have accepted it? That's when I knew I'd finally made peace with the truth. Some things don't get repaired. They just get buried under enough silence to stop bleeding. My mom passed that spring. Heart failure. Sudden but not unexpected. She'd had issues for years, the kind of chronic warnings we all quietly ignored because they were easier to pretend away than to face head on. The funeral was small, closed casket, lots of deviled eggs, and polite murmurs in the church basement afterward. Newark hasn't changed much. Still the kind of town where people wear their grief like Sunday clothes, neatly pressed and temporary. I stood by the coffee urn and listened to my aunt retell the same story she always did. How Mom once rescued a stray beagle in a snowstorm and named it Colonel Mustard. She laughed. I didn't. Grief didn't hit me like a wave. It arrived like fog, creeping in, settling under the skin, blurring the edges of everything. I thought I'd feel more, but mostly I felt unfinished. She never knew what really happened between me and my ex. Never asked why I disappeared. She probably assumed I'd screwed it up somehow. That's the role I've been cast in my whole life. The quiet failure, the almost success. The one who never quite made it out of his own way. At the gravesite, my sister cried like it was scripted. I just stood there, hands in pockets, thinking about how many times I could have told Mom the truth. How many late-night phone calls I ignored because I didn't want to explain something I barely understood myself. I kept waiting for the regret to hit, for the guilt to wrap around my ribs and squeeze. But it didn't come the way I expected. Instead, it showed up later that week, when I found her handwriting on a recipe card tucked inside an old Betty Crocker cookbook she'd given me years ago. It said, "Chicken and rice, Jacob's favorite. Don't forget the parsley." Jacob. She hadn't called me that since I was a kid. And that's when I finally cried. In my kitchen. Alone. The way it had always been. After Mom's funeral, I stayed in Newark for a few days to help my sister sort through the house. It felt like walking through a museum curated by ghosts. Plastic-wrapped furniture, old Avon bottles, unopened VHS box sets of Touched by an Angel. Every drawer had a story I was too late to ask about. We found a shoebox in the hall closet filled with photos. Most were old vacation shots. Me in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt, Mom in those oversized sunglasses she refused to throw out. But in the bottom of the box, folded like a secret, was a letter. It was from Dad. He'd left when I was 11. Said he was going to the store and just didn't come back. I spent years imagining what he might say if he ever returned. Turned out, he had said something, just not to me. The letter was addressed to Mom, dated 2 months after he left. In it, he apologized for being weak, for not knowing how to stay. Said he loved us both, but couldn't stand what he saw in a mirror anymore. And then, one line near the end, "Tell Jacob I left because I didn't think I was enough of a man to be his father." I must have read it 20 times. My hands shaking like they had a memory of their own. All my life, I thought his absence meant I wasn't worth staying for. That I'd been forgettable, disposable. But the letter shifted something. He hadn't left because of me. He left in spite of me, because his shame was louder than his love. That doesn't make it okay. But it did give shape to a hole I'd been circling my whole life without knowing its name. I didn't show my sister the letter. Not out of secrecy, but out of mercy. Some truths are meant for just one person. That night, back in the motel, I laid the letter on the nightstand and stared at it like it might speak again. It didn't. But in the silence, I felt something unfamiliar. Not peace, but permission to stop carrying weight that was never mine to hold. I drove the Ranger back to Groveport the next morning, the letter still folded in my jacket pocket. I didn't know why I brought it with me. Maybe part of me wanted to burn it. Maybe part of me just wanted proof that it existed, that he existed, that I did. Back home, I cleaned. Not out of obligation, but ritual. I swept the porch. I fixed a cabinet door that had been hanging crooked for months. I watered the half-dead plant by the window. Not because I thought it would bloom again, but because it hadn't given up yet. And neither had I. I've stopped needing things to make sense. I no longer look for signs or karma or justice neatly tied in a bow. Life doesn't work like that. People don't work like that. We leave. We betray. We return. We grow. We vanish. We hurt and heal and sometimes never get an explanation for either. But we keep going. A few nights ago, I finally went to that game night at the VFW. Played euchre with a retired school nurse named Fran and a guy who used to build refrigerators in Dayton. We lost. Badly. I laughed so hard I had to step outside to catch my breath. That laugh didn't sound like a stranger anymore. And that's the thing. I'm not fixed. I'm not whole. I still wake up, sometimes expecting the past to knock at my door. But I don't flinch when it does. I just nod and let it pass through me like wind through an open window. She and Jack? I heard they broke up. Not that it matters. Their story stopped being mine the moment I let it go. Sometimes I still drive at night. No destination. Just the road and the sound of that old truck humming beneath me. There's something sacred about motion without expectation. A kind of peace in knowing the past is behind you. Not a race, just parked. I don't know what's next. And for once, I don't need to. All I know is this. I am no longer anyone's fool. I am no one's ghost. And for the first time in a long, long time, Iam Mine.